Still don't know why that's not number one, Ronnie.
No, it's because we keep buying it, I think, Roger, isn't it? I'm bankrupt now with buying that song so many times.
Speaking of numbers, I've put on the thumbnail, this is number 11. So I think we ought to have a change of name, Ronnie. We ought to call it Still Alive But Can't Bloody Count.
Yeah, that's it. Still alive but can't remember. Probably is more accurate.
Can't remember to count. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, so welcome people in the house, as we say. So we've got Michael, Haya, Terry, Suzanne, Deb, and the spiritual vegan. So welcome along, one and all, and we'll allow people to ethically based ex-omnivore just arrived in the house. So people are piling in. They must think we've got something to tell them. Joanna Tech, thank you for doing the necessary in terms of our what they call them, spam and all that kind of stuff. Linda Carroll, hiya. Nella, hello Nella.
Hi Nella. Hi everyone.
Hi everyone. Yes, so
I think it's a topical subject. I think this is why it might be kind of, a bit more popular with people on live stream. And I've got a very suitable T-shirt on today. It's a cage vide is French, means empty cages, and it's from my good friend Eric Moreau, who's a French anti-vivisection activist. Runs an organisation called International Campaigns in France, primarily an anti-vivisection group, and he sent me this T-shirt a couple of years ago, and I'm proudly wearing it today.
All right, so you actually brought it from France back, did you?
He sent it to me.
Oh,
he sent it to me as a birthday present, I think, or Christmas present, like a couple of years ago. And
look, Terry's been out on a Boxing Day anti-hunt thing.
Good, well done, Terry.
Yeah, well done.
Give him some stick, these bastards.
I remember when the league used to do their once-a-year demos on Boxing Day, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah, and then they kind of stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Hopefully the hunt will have got too pissed up to go and hunt on Boxing Day. Of course, I sometimes tell the famous story of a friend of mine in Hunt Sabs who worked in a bar, and the hunt were meeting there, and he put liquid laxative in their stirrup cups.
That's right. Yeah, you said that. Yeah.
That didn't.
Yeah.
So they're all running for the toilet instead of galloping for the toilet.
Hunt on the run. The hunt on the run.
Hunt on the run in more ways than one. That's a eat your heart out, Alfred Lord Tennyson, with that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. There we are. Anyway,
so Ronnie, would it be right to say that you've got at least partly beagles on your mind?
Well, yes, because of course, the big news at the moment is the liberation of it was 20 beagles initially by Animal Rebellion from MBR acres, just a few days ago, really, wasn't it? And sadly, two of them were kind of given back by the police. So there was 18 free, and I think a marvelous action, to be quite honest, and full support.
Is there any update with regard to those? Because there's been some demos trying to get them released.
There's been demos. You see, I think sadly, kind of what happened was, and I don't know the full details, I think two of the beagles were intercepted by the police actually at MBR. And the activists pleaded with those police to, let us have the dogs back, which at the time the police could have done. The dogs were in the back of a police car. The police could have said, look, we're going
for a while, weren't they?
We're going to go for a little walk and we'll leave the car unlocked. They could have done that. Those police officers could have done that.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. And really, after that moment, that was really the moment when the dogs really could have been released by the police, realistically, because after that, once they're taken to the police headquarters
again, Ronnie, they'd have been on film doing that, so they would have been
risking kind of possibly, there are cameras there, but for whatever, that was the only real chance realistically they had been released by the police. Once that moment passes, it becomes a lot more difficult, because then they go to the police headquarters, higher police officials become involved.
Then it will be seen as corruption. You're not going to bother about that, are you, Ronnie?
Well, what police corruption? I mean, no, I've never heard of police corruption before. Danny, so I don't know what that is. That's never happened before, police corruption, has it? Well, would have been the right sort of police corruption, wouldn't it? Rather than the other stuff that goes on sometimes.
Yeah, well, I always like to tell the story about there used to be a couple of coppers on the Essex Hunt who used to send the hunt the wrong way, and
they can do little bits, because we've got to remember with the police, the police are drawn from like the ordinary public, so you get horrible ones and you get decent ones, don't you, depending on where they're drawn from. And it just happened that maybe it's a shame that perhaps the coppers that got those, grabbed those beagles were perhaps not a little bit more decent, and perhaps a little bit more thinking on their feet about, is there a way that we can?
Well, it could be due to the circumstances. We don't really know.
You don't know, but you see, nevertheless, you see, once they kind of got into the hands of the higher authorities of the police, then it was kind of difficult, because obviously they're still the property of MBR Acres. And I think what happened eventually, I think that the protests at the police station, that, like, I still understand the point of that, in that the police are involved in negotiations, and if you get the police kind of trying to put a bit of pressure on MBR to relinquish the beagles, that could have had an effect. But I think in the end, probably what's happened, and this is kind of sort of forms part of this show really, and stuff we're going to discuss, is that the Home Office insisted that the dogs be given back to MBR or be returned somehow into the hands of the vivisection industry. And I think we'll probably find that the Home Office was at the root of this.
Yeah, because they wanted to, well, yeah.
They can't see.
Do you think it's, I've got this feeling that at the moment they're in a, we need to nip this in the bud situation. Do you think that's possible? In terms of what the anti-vivisection movement used to be like?
I think if they were kind of really wanting to nip it in the bud, they're like, and they'd been like really on the case. I think they'd have done that quite some time ago, and with Camp Beagle, and not allowed Camp Beagle to be there at all, and so. But I think now, I think kind of what tends to happen is they wait to see how things go, and once it reaches a certain stage, that's when they move in. And historically, that's kind of what happened in the past with the ALF, and it's what happened with Shack and other campaigns, the Speak campaign, and these campaigns again.
A technical question for you, Ronnie. Deb's asking, what is the Home Office? So
the Home Office. Well, they're in charge of like various things to do with.
Yeah, they license them, don't they? They
do various things to do. Like they're in control of prisons and stuff like that. But one of the things that they oversee is animal experimentation.
That's just another prison, Ronnie.
Well, and kind of worse than a prison. Certainly worse than prisons I've been in. I certainly wasn't. I wasn't tortured. In prison, I can say. Sometimes the noise was a bit painful. The Home Office is responsible for the country's safety. Yeah. Well, they probably think they are. They probably think it's an internal. Get the Foreign Office that deals with the foreign affairs, and the Home Office deals with internal affairs in the country in kind of in various ways.
Do you have anything about this? Because the one thing that I'm obviously always banging on about property status and everything. And one thing that really I noticed in the press reports is that the campaigners were saying that the police had said, or the vivisectors had said, that now that these dogs were seen as contaminated property, they would have to be killed. And so that presumably must be a lever to get them away.
Well, I find that strange, because if you look at the conditions, you look at the video because one of the brilliant things about the rescue, it was totally open. They were in there. The activists wearing pink T-shirts. They didn't try to hide their faces. They waited for the police afterwards. It was a totally open thing. We're not doing anything wrong. We're rescuing these dogs from from torture. And in the video shows the conditions the dogs were in. They're kept in filthy conditions. So how can they be more contaminated than what they're contaminated already? It's nonsense. And it's the same with other.
Well, they've got to give the pretense that it's science. That's why, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not science. It's a commercial enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and they will try to run that in the way that that yields the most profit, which is that the more expense that's paid on keeping those dogs in comfort, that's less money, that's less profit for them, isn't it? So they're going to keep those dogs in the minimum conditions, aren't they? In terms of their well-being, of course, cheapest. Yeah. And so, of course, how they can be contaminated, I don't know. But like, you know, is that something they say? Is that a genuine thing, or is it just something they're saying as like a kind of?
Well, I did see it in the local paper that so I don't know where the source of that came from. Whether it was
it's quite a frequent thing, you know. Way back in the past in the ALF when we rescued animals, they said the same.
Yeah, Suzanne's saying they could have been put into quarantine, but then again, they wouldn't need to be if they were going to be, because the latest is that the campaigns are saying, look, we've got a sanctuary lined up for them. What the vivisectors are saying, and this is laughable as well, is that, oh, they're in danger. You know what vivisectors are like? They just say weird stuff, you know, like, oh, you know, I hope you know that these animals need to be fed and this kind of shite, right?
Yeah, they make out there that somehow that they're the good guys. It's like the Nazis saying, "Oh, you released those people from the concentration camp. They're not going to survive because they're just used to living on like meager scraps." And
the shock of the change.
They're never going to survive if you release them.
But that's what they said. They said, "Oh, you know, that they've had a change of circumstance." Well, the thing is, when they take them from the breeding unit to the vivisection laboratory, that's a change of circumstance as well.
The whole thing's nonsense. But like, you know, you know, there's a famous saying, isn't there? That a person who doesn't hesitate to vivisect won't hesitate to lie about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Isn't there? I forget that's a very famous person.
Yeah,
said that.
Yeah, I think it was George Bernard Shaw.
Might have been George Bernard Shaw. Yeah, and it's absolutely true. They're not going to lie. The lie is a minor thing compared with the torture, isn't it? So that's no problem for them to lie. Of course not.
Yeah.
You know,
well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, another part of what we wrote in the description, Ronnie, was kind of an indication that you think there might be a problem brewing or something, in the sense that you're saying we've got to be careful about pitfalls from the past.
Well, you see, if we kind of look at the history of, you know, the anti-vivisection movement in this country, that kind of for years and years, you just had these national organisations that were telling people to write to their MP basically and send them money. You know, National Anti-Vivisection Society, British Union for Abolition of Vivisection, and the same. You know, I know there's people from outside the UK watching this as well. It would have been the same in other countries as well. And then when it got to the 70s, there was like this, you know, real radical upsurge and militant upsurge within the, you know, the animal rights movement. Really, that's where that's when it was born, really. And you had people taking militant action against animal experimentation. You know, there was the Animal Liberation Front, the Animal Liberation Leagues, and then you had the Shack campaign and the Speak campaign, and you know, and other campaigns where people were prepared to exert much more pressure on the industry in various ways. And, you know, for a while, that kind of a great deal of success came from that for a while. You know, like we were kind of riding a wave of success, really. And then eventually it was kind of as if the state woke up to what they perceived as a threat.
Just before you go there, though, Ronnie, there's other elements to it. For example, you know, 77 when Animal Aid was born, but also the radicalization of the BYV.
Yes, we're not just talking about, you know.
So it was kind of across the board thing.
It was across the board. You know, could say that direct action was cutting edge, but there were other people. I mean, there was one demonstration that I went to in the early 1980s, where there was 8,000 people, possibly more than that, took part in I think it's a World Day. Yeah, I think that's the one. That's the BEAGLE's magazine at the time, Liberator.
Well, I mean that in itself. I mean the actual the Liberator, the title of the thing, because it was a magazine at once. It was like a glossy magazine. Then they made it into like
it became much more grassroots in their
yeah, but before that, it was just called Animal Welfare. So when the BYV was taken over, they had this magazine, and they were known to be the abolitionists of the vivisection organizations and all that. And their big magazine was called Animal Welfare. It goes to show, what the state of the movement was.
Yes, and they became radicalized. Now, I think over the years have become considerably de-radicalized again, and they're not known as the BUAV anymore. British Union for Abolition of Vivisection, known as Cruelty Free.
Terry there says, not heard of this newspaper. Looks nice though. Yeah. So
it was great. Yeah, it was a really good newspaper, and very supportive of the ALF, or certainly supportive of the ALF when the ALF rescued animals. I think they were kind of not so sure when it was damaged, but certainly the animal rescue was.
The animal rescue was popular with everybody, wasn't it? Because
it kind of was. We're seeing that again as well, aren't we? Now with the rescue of the beagles. So it was. Yeah, there were the huge numbers of people. You see now, World Day, you're kind of lucky if you get 600 people on it. To be quite honest, on the World Day for the Laboratory Animal March here in the UK. In those days, there was one where it was more than 8,000. I think
there might have been one which was 12,000. I think.
Yeah, and possibly more than that. It's always difficult with the figures, isn't it? Because people have different estimates, but there certainly was a bigger one marched than that one as well. These huge figures that we the only march that's kind of starting to approach that figure now is the Animal Rights March in London every year. That's kind of getting big now. But
that's the Sturge one, right? But the point is the anti-vivisection ones, they're going to get bigger because of Camp Beagle, aren't they now?
Well, I think they may do. I mean, that kind of hasn't happened as yet, but that may happen. But certainly, but you see, the thing is, in those days, the big focus was on animal experimentation. That was the big focus of the animal rights movement. And then the second largest focus was probably the fur trade. But you see, there wasn't, veganism and vegan outreach and stuff like that wasn't wasn't done. Or veganism was. I mean, loads of people were vegan then, and I think that the people that ran the BUAV were almost all vegan by the time you started getting that sort of article in their magazine. But that nobody promoted veganism, but anti-vivisection was like the big thing. And then so you had all these different, you had this big surge of different activity against animal experimentation, and like it did have an impact. I mean, if you look at the official figures produced by the Home Office for animal experimentation between the mid-70s and the mid-80s, showed a massive reduction in the number of animal experiments carried out in the UK. In the mid 70s, the figures had been rising for quite a while up until the mid 70s, and they'd reached well over 6 million a year. And then, but 10 years later, they were 3 million, down to 3 million. So there'd been this huge reduction.
Well, that gave rise. You remember that famous T-shirt by the BWV? Every 6 seconds, an animal dies in a British laboratory.
That's right. Yeah, it's actually about that was when it's actually about every 10 seconds now, and that reflects that reduction. I mean, there's been over the years, kind of since the decline of that kind of emphasis on animal experimentation, I suppose. There has been a rise in experiments. I think they've risen to kind of from sort of 3 million up to around about 4 million, but it's never gone back to over 6 million. It's never returned to that high
but
point.
Ronnie, for context, you say 10 now, every 10 seconds, one. But I mean, what is it per second for animal agriculture?
It is, in this country, 250.
per second.
250 animals are killed to feed the UK population every second.
Yeah.
Every second.
And it's a few thousand worldwide, right? And so that is the kind of context of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the context of it. And like the vast majority of those animals are fish and other sea creatures in, 7 out of 8. They're they're not fluffy and cuddly and stuff, but they're just as feeling and just as aware and just as important as all the animals that are oppressed by humans. And it's
funny enough on that, right? Somebody mentioned over Christmas that of all the other animals who you might see on the table, like these festive tables, so-called. I'm doing bunny rabbit ears here. Fishes are the ones that they keep the head on, don't they? And because it's almost as though, I don't know, we just don't empathize.
And I think
they have to bother.
This is the thing, and yet they're massively the main victim. Not just fish, but other sea animals. Shrimps and lobsters and all these other animals that humans stuff down their throats.
Yeah, when they're not being directly fed to humans, they're being fed to human so-called livestock too.
And a lot of them are being fed to fish in fish farms, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, this is why Sea Shepherd became a vegan operation, because Paul Watson suddenly found that that cows and so-called livestock and also the fish farms were some of the main predators of the sea, the free-living fishes.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely appalling, and we need to remember this: that the main victims of human oppression are sea creatures. They're not creatures that live on the land. I mean, that doesn't mean that, they're all important. They're all equally important, but I think often it's forgotten. And
if we're not killing them, we're throwing our trash in there.
Well, yes, of course. But you see, what we've got to remember, like the trash in the ocean, right? Plastic pollution of the ocean. Almost half the plastic pollution in the ocean comes from the fishing industry. Discarded nets and other fishing tackles left, and that animals get caught in that, fishes and dolphins and all sorts of other sea creatures. And so the best way, people talk about, I don't use plastic straws anymore, aren't I brilliant? I'm preventing plastic pollution. The best way to stop plastic pollution is stop eating fish.
Yeah, do you want to explain this phenomena of ghost nets, Ronnie?
The ghost nets, yes, it's the ghost nets. That's right, it's the ghost nets that are left. They just, cut
Some of them are miles long, aren't they?
Yeah, it horrific. And the other thing is industrialized fishing makes a huge contribution to the climate crisis. It's more responsible for emissions than the whole of the aviation industry. I mean, we talk about, one of the main things we can do to not be part of the climate crisis, not to fly, to try and minimize our flying because of the huge impact, the emissions from aircraft and stuff like that. And that's really important, but the fishing industry is more responsible than the aviation industry. And that's for two reasons. First of all, direct emissions coming from, the fuel that's used to propel these vehicles, but also because the harm they do to the ocean. They destroy ocean habitats that sequester carbon. They destroy things like, by the trawling and all that. They destroy kelp beds, for instance, and other vegetation in the sea that traps carbon. And so it's the same as like destroying a rainforest in the sea. So it's also, a huge contributor to the climate crisis as well. The fishing industry.
Well, just going back to the ghost nets, because the thing about those, these are the kind of ones that have been dragged through the ocean, and they're just like a long netting. But sometimes they snap off, or they snap in half. But some of them can be miles long, and so what happens then is they carry on catching the fishes. It's just that nobody's hauling them onto the boats.
Yeah, absolutely. They still
and then the net gets so heavy because
they're trapped.
Then they sink.
Yeah,
and then everyone, as it were, rots at the bottom of the ocean, and then the bloody thing comes back up again.
Yeah, and the rotting of those fish is going to contribute to the carbon to the climate crisis as well. That's going to produce emissions.
Just one more example of human arrogance.
Yeah, but I think because we've gone a little. I mean, that's been important to talk about, but we've gone a little.
Yeah. Let's get back. Let's get back to vivisection.
You see, and so, but what happened eventually, and and there kind of were gains. There were places, the same people that ran the Shack campaign, they ran successful campaigns to close places that bred animals for experiments. Hillgrove Farm, that was a cat breeding place, was closed because of like a consistent campaign of all sorts of actions taking place. Big demos outside, there's a bit of direct action going on. There was stuff done. The guy that ran the farm ran a sort of bed and breakfast business, and there was disruption caused to that, and all sorts went on. And in the end, they gave up, and I think the cats were taken out of there by the RSPCA and found homes, and it was closed. And the same happened with and there was 1 or 2 beagle breeders as well, sort of over Herefordshire, Worcestershire, that closed as well because of campaigners' pressure on them. And then the next target was hunting and life sciences. So this movement, the anti-vivisection movement, was on a roll. Success. A success place called Regal Rabbits, I think, that down in the southeast. Regal Rabbits. As soon as the campaign against Regal Rabbits was announced, they closed. They said, "Shit, we don't want this." They knew what happened.
I think the campaign was about 36 hours long, wasn't it?
Another campaign. But you see, what happened was, and then Huntingdon Life Science, that was a bigger target. Huge success to start with against HLS, like a campaign to cut off their supply, to cut off their life support. Loads of people stopped supplying HLS because pressure was put. Even the people that supplied the bog paper. Like all of these, like pressure. But what happened in the end was that the kind of state caught up with this in various ways, because they kind of thought, we can't allow this to continue, because it's all backed up, it's all supported by like the pharmaceutical industry. They're like the second biggest industry in the world, second to the arms trade or something, aren't they? Huge. This huge financial pressure on a government that is has a neoliberal ideology that is pro big business, right? So quite easy for big business to get the government to do what they want. And so what happened was, then you had a crackdown by the government against the activists in various ways. New laws brought in, using of old laws that were never meant to be used in that way, such as blackmail and and even other laws that have been brought in for different purposes, like the laws against stalking. Special police squads set up to specifically target and arrest animal liberation activists, and support. The Shack campaign, for instance, they persuaded all the banks to withdraw. No bank would offer banking facilities to HLS. And that would have meant they'd have gone under. But what happened? The government stepped in, and the Bank of England, this was unprecedented. It never happened before. The Bank of England offered them, and this was the government at the end of the day. Because you see, the thing is that if you're like at war, say to speak, against a commercial enterprise, right? If you harm their profits sufficiently, they're going to go under. They're going to go under. If you harm their profits sufficiently, they're going to go under. Because that's all they think about. It's all about making money. And are these people? You see, if you look at the campaign against the fur trade that the ALF waged, where the government didn't step in, and I think it's because the fur trade wasn't a powerful enough business industry, so to speak, that all these department stores that got rid of their fur departments are when the ALF started attacking them, because they thought, for financial reasons, it's not worth having a fur department because we're losing so much money through all this damage by having a fur department. It's better not to have a fur department. They made a decision based on finance, based on economics, because that's how they operate. But the state doesn't operate like that. The state operates on ideological grounds. They're interested in preserving and promoting a particular ideology, and so they're not going to be affected in the same way, by kind of the threat of economic loss or anything like that. They're just going to think, whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we're going to stop these people, because they're those people, the people that are kind of fighting against vivisection, or indeed fighting against any form of animal oppression. Their ideology is the opposite of ours. Our ideology is in favour of the oppression of other animals.
Doesn't it apply to animal farming, Ronnie, as well as vivisection?
Yeah, yes, it applies to animal farming as well. I mean, of course, we've got huge subsidies going into animal farming. Yes, it will apply to animal farming.
Yeah, I think why the pharmaceutical industry are a special case is the fact that so much rests on it. You know, chemicals, the pharmaceutical industry itself, but all the kind of product testing and everything. It's a globalized situation. If a government would let Shaq win, as it were, that would have put Britain on a major global disadvantage. And so they just couldn't afford to do it, not least for the fact they've got all their mates going, "Oh,
it's to do with
this problem."
You're up against a huge industry in compared with the fur trade, for instance. Like the vivisection industry is kind of massive in terms of its economic clout, shall we say? And this is why the government went to such lengths to crush.
The farmers, but then the fur farmers weren't. So that's the difference.
The fur farmers weren't. They didn't. And like I was involved in, like a campaign for many years against the greyhound racing industry, and that, they kind of collapsing like a pack of cards. The dog tracks.
Not in Ireland, they're not.
Not in Ireland, but you see the government.
Yeah,
in
the
Ireland
government supports them.
Because of the ideology of the, but over here, no support from the government.
And the saddest thing, right, Ronnie, is that about 3 weeks ago they did a public poll, and most people were in support of the government carry on giving them a bailout.
Yeah. You see, now whether that's something particular to Ireland or no, I think if that was done in Britain, in England, it wouldn't be the same result.
No, I agree with that. Yeah,
you see, and I think that's something to do with the Irish psychology.
But anyway, let's not.
Anyway, you see, this is the thing, and so the state doesn't matter what it costs, because they're operating on ideological grounds, and rather than on commercial grounds, they will do whatever it costs to crush people they see as their opponents. Right, and that is what happens with the anti-vivisection campaign. That's what happened with the ALF. It happened with Shaq. It happened with Speak.
And that's what you worried happening again.
Well, the thing is that yes, because we already see indications of it. And this is why I'm talking about like Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day was a film, and basically it's about a guy that is forced to repeat the same day over and over and over and over and over again. And there's some estimates that the length of time that he had to repeat that day was for about 80 years. Someone's done this, kind of worked it out from the film. The same day over and over again until he radically changed his life, radically changed the person he was. So that became a better person, really. And it was then that he was able to kind of escape that day and carry on. Woke up one morning and it was the next day instead of the same day, right? And so Groundhog Day is about kind of really repeating the same mistakes over and over again in a sense, and not learning from what's happened in the past. And I kind of fear that this is going to happen again.
But Ronnie, just to ask the big question here, from what you've said already, the big thing is, well, don't bother, because they're going to bail them out whatever you do, isn't it?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. Okay. I mean, yes, there was some success, from the that big movement against vivisection we had in the past, in terms of a reduction of animal experiments that kind of still remains today. The situation for animals in laboratories would have been far worse in the UK had that campaign not occurred. I'm really quite convinced of that. But it didn't lead to a total victory. It didn't lead to the end of all animal experimentation, and it still left a situation where many millions of experiments were still carried out every year. Right? We've got a revival of the movement against vivisection. It's great that that has increased awareness of animals in laboratories and what happens to them. I think that's absolutely brilliant. But my concern is we're already starting to see what happened in the previous campaign. It didn't, you know, the assault of the state on the anti-vivisection campaign didn't start straight away. They kind of waited till it built up a bit, and they thought, hang on, these people, this is starting to get a bit worrying now. These people are starting to kind of close places down. These people are starting to kind of achieve things. We need to crack down. We need to move in. We need to marshal all our forces in different ways to like crush this campaign. And that's what they did. And you can see, and you see, if it is the case that the Home Office has intervened with these beagles, which I, quite strongly believe is the case, then we're starting to see the beginning of that again kind of happening here. And of course, the thing is that you see, they are going to do that. We have a government that, I mean, this up on the stage from Joanna here. Yes, please do write to Mel. And because Mel's incarceration is yet another example of the state's attack on the anti-vivisection movement, Mel's in prison to do with his anti-vivisection campaigning. So please do write to him. Tell him what you're doing in terms of campaigning. Don't put anything illegal in your letters because they tend to be read by the prison authorities. But please do drop Mel a line. And that, I know when I was in prison, it was wonderful hearing from other campaigners. So please write to him and, cheer him up.
It makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a big difference. You see, and you can see this, that, there's Mel in jail. You can see them starting to move now because they see, this movement started again. And, this is a really high point, I think, for the anti-vivisection movement to rescue these dogs. There's huge public support for that. It raises awareness, it puts pressure on the industry and all these things, and that's great. But you see and I'm not saying that people shouldn't do any of that. I'm not saying people shouldn't do any of that. What I'm saying is unless something else happens in tandem with that the same thing is going to happen again. And as soon as the anti-vivisection movement starts looking like it's going to really achieve some degree of success through like protest and direct action, then the state is going to move in once again to crush that campaign like they did in the past. Right. And so what we need to do, we have to undermine the power of the state to do that.
Oh, that's easy. Tell us how to do that, Ronnie.
Well, no, I mean, none of it's easy. None of it's easy at all. I mean, rescuing those dogs isn't easy. It isn't easy to be out in the cold, at Camp Beagle all through the freezing weather where people have stayed there. None of it's easy, but we have to, because what it is it's like constantly, people dashing themselves up against the brick wall of the state all the time, like you hit this brick wall and like you're smashed to pieces. Because, and the thing is, what we have to do something about that brick wall. We have to do something to dismantle the brick wall that is standing in our way. And that means we have to actually change the nature of the state, and we have to change the nature of politics, and we have to change the nature of the people who are in power in this country.
It's our Berlin Wall, isn't it?
Yeah. And unless we do that, we will constantly come up against this problem. Of this, against an intractable, political opposition. These people are ideologically totally opposed to really everything we believe in. And so how far are you ever going to get with people like that? It's like, Animal Rebellion's campaign. We want, a plant-based future, wonderful. And I think their campaign's wonderful, but I think their campaign's wonderful in terms of the public awareness it raises. In terms of moving the government, it's very hard to see how this government can be moved. How you've got this extreme neoliberal regime that has an ideology that, like, the only value of anything is if it can be used for profit, including other animals. You've got to replace those people. You have to replace those people. You can't hope that you can batter and batter and batter and it'll make a difference, because you're just going to be smashed against the rocks. And so how do we replace those people? How do we create a political administration in this country that is
we make you prime minister, Ronnie?
What we're asking for. Oh, you know, I mean, in some ways I'd love to be prime minister, and otherwise I kind of wouldn't. I'd probably delegate everything to you if I was prime minister and go.
You haven't got the hair for it, Ronnie.
Have a cup of tea. No, you've got more the hair for it, actually. If like kind of that colour hair all going mad. It's like you know, this is what presidents have as well, isn't it? Or they used to have in the USA. It gets you elected. That hair could get you elected, Roger. Don't forget.
Look, before you develop that, could I?
How do we change the regime? You know, why have we got the government we've got that is so fucking awful in so many ways? And like, there's nothing. You know, this is a bunch of evil. You know, and mad people, mad and evil. Not just evil, they're mad as well, because they'll bring everything down, and they'll be brought down with it. You know, if we carry on not doing anything, you know, to combat the climate crisis, for instance, which they're kind of not. Why have we got them? Well, we got them because almost 30% of the electorate voted these buggers in. Ordinary people got them because of the actions of ordinary people, right? We got them because of the actions of ordinary people. You know, it wasn't a coup. It wasn't a military coup that installed these people, like some people in other countries have to deal with, where they, you know, people can't vote and stuff like that. I mean, we've got the right to vote because people protested and people campaigned, and I think, you know, in some instances, people lost their lives fighting for that. And it gives us a way in. You know, these people, you know, like they shouldn't have had to die for nothing. Those people that suffered and died, you know, to give us that right. And so, but what's happened is people have used that right to vote in like a, you know, a most horrendous, probably the most horrendous regime we've ever had in this country. And so, if you're going to, you want to change that round, you want an administration that is much more sympathetic, that's going to kind of bring in laws to abolish animal experimentation. It's going to move the country towards a vegan diet. That's going to end the fur trade, end hunting, properly end hunting, and all these things. We have to have a totally different type of administration in this country, and we have to do our utmost to ensure that. Otherwise, we're never going to get further than a certain point. As soon as we look like we're going to be successful anyway, they're going to crush, like they've done before. And we need to learn from history and not let this, not have a repetition of Groundhog Days, where we constantly kind of make the same mistake in not doing the vital thing that's necessary to bring all this oppression of other animals to an end. And so, you know, going back to what I was saying, okay, so we want people to, you know, to kind of to vote in a particular way. We want decent politicians to be elected that won't be focused. We'll be focused on ending the oppression of other animals rather than jailing the people that are trying to end that oppression, right? And so, how do we change the mindsets of people, and how do we get the politicians that are going to bring this, you know, decent society about? Well, first of all, we need more vegan politicians, right? And in order to get those politicians elected, we need more vegans to vote for them. And so how do we get all that? How we get that is through vegan education. How we get that is through vegan education, massively more vegan education, and vegan education everywhere as much as possible, with as many possible vegans being involved in doing that. You see, we kind of have to look at these things at a deeper level. We have to destroy the rocks that are constantly crushing our campaigns. And so in some ways it can be argued that vegan education is vital for ending animal experimentation, because it's only through sufficient vegan education that we are going to bring about an administration that will put animal experimentation to an end. That's the only way it'll happen. That's the only way it'll happen.
Well, look, Ronnie, in relation to that then, let's develop this point by bringing in my friend and yours, Gary Francione. Now, you said before these things have got to be in tandem, but in some ways it could be that the vegan education bit has got to be first, because I mean, this is the book that is on the screen. So we've got chapter 2 here, which is called Vivisection, a trickier question, right? And so basically, the bottom line is he's saying if you take on vivisection, you're taking on the hardest thing first. So he's basically saying, look, we need to change the culture, and so we need a much less speciesist world for vivisection to be finally tackled. Not least because the way that vivisection puts itself over is that this is a genuine emergency situation, hence the picture of the cover of the book, which is what are you going to choose, your dog or your child? And that's the thing that vivisectors say all the time. And so rather than the tandem thing, isn't it really, because Francione says that vivisection is the only type of animal use that you could regard as not completely frivolous, transparently so. And so by resurrecting the vivisection campaign, isn't that doing the hardest thing first?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things I'd say on that. I mean, yeah. First of all, the fundamental reason that vivisection exists is human supremacism, is speciesism, right? It's this concept which is completely irrational and totally immoral, that humans are somehow more important than other sentient animals, right? Because, like, if we look at like almost everyone, unless they're like an extreme Nazi, would condemn the experiments that the Nazis carried out on Jewish people and people of other races, and on anyone that they kind of considered inferior to the Aryan race. And they did those experiments for the benefit of the Aryan race, and saying, well, my little Aryan child would die unless we experimented on this Jewish person. That would be, what they'd have said. But we regard that as like totally wrong, because we would say, well, no, you're not superior to those other people that you experimented on. You're not superior to those other people, and so therefore it's wrong. It was morally wrong to do those experiments, no matter what the result, no matter how much of benefit to the Aryan race those experiments may have been. Still morally wrong, still shouldn't do them. They should never happen, right? So the reason why animal experimentation takes place, the reason why people somehow think it's okay, is because of human supremacism, is because humans regard themselves as more important than other sentient animals, in the same way as the Nazis regarded themselves as more important than people of other races, right? And so we have to challenge and we have to defeat human supremacism, right? And the fundamental way we do that, once again, is vegan education, because it's kind of has to be an education that kind of goes deeper than just people being kind of upset about beagle dogs being experimented on. It's about the whole mindset, challenging the whole supremacist mindset of humans. And we kind of only do that through vegan education, and proper vegan education. It isn't just about food, but it's about the whole concept of animal liberation, the whole concept of opposition to speciesism. So that's the first thing I'd say. Now, whether the education should come first, you see, I kind of think it's kind of very difficult in a sense that, people, people see animals in a laboratory, or know animals in the laboratory, that they know they're in there. A place like MBR, people are drawn to go outside these places. People are drawn to rescue the beagles. You can understand the emotional pull that has. And so you'd be saying to those people, don't do that. I want you to stop doing that. And I want you to go and give out some vegan leaflets. Now, like, realistically, is that going to happen? Is that the right way to approach it? And I think my approach wouldn't be that. My approach would be, I'm in solidarity with what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. I understand that what you're doing can and probably will have some effect. But what I'd say to all these people is it's really because of the vital importance of vegan education to fundamentally end animal experimentation, that vegan education needs to be included in all these things. It's like if somebody's doing a street stall against animal experimentation, have information on that stall as well that you give to people that will promote veganism, right? On your websites, have stuff that promotes veganism. In conversations with people, promote veganism, promote the wider picture and not just be talking about the animal experiments, promote.
And just to be clear on that, Ronnie, you're talking about which promotes vegan philosophy, not
vegan, yes,
recipe,
vegan, not just the diet, but like the whole. But to get people to what we have to do is change people fundamentally as individuals. Because if we change people fundamentally as individuals, we change the mindset of those people, and we change, the way those people think politically, and the way those people will vote politically and behave politically. And that's what we're aiming at. If we're going to, if we eventually want laws to end vivisection, if we eventually want politicians that will not stand in the way of campaigns to end animal experimentation. So you have to change people's mindset. You have to change them really at a fundamental level. And that's why I'm saying, and often you see it's about someone changing their life, and in favour of animal liberation. And one major thing that major step people can take in doing that is changing their diet, because like the biggest thing almost everyone does in their life, unless that person's a hunter or they're a vivisector or there's someone like that, the main thing, the huge thing that everyone does in their life that contributes to the oppression of other animals is their consumption of animal products. You see, so you get people to see that, kind of don't be part of this oppression, and that then I think sets people on the road to like totally changing their outlook. So that's kind of the first step, because it kind of goes to, the basic behavior and the basic outlook of those people as individuals.
There's the other trickier issue, isn't there, about their consumption of vivisection products as well, in the sense, and I know that gets us into difficult kind of areas. But I mean, through my time, and you've been at it longer. Generally speaking, vegans have kind of been popping pills a lot less than just about anybody else that I know. I mean, I used to always get the impression that if you grabbed your average kind of person and kind of shook them, they kind of rattle,
Yes.
And that wasn't the case. I mean, like, normally, the vegans would go for the generic kind of stuff, and they would do things like, they'd wait a while. My own sister, she used to have this slogan, kind of, well, if I take this course of whatever, it'll be okay in 6 or 7 days, and if I don't, I'll be okay in a week. And so I think vegans are less likely to just reach for those kind of products anyway, but because there are the more kind of life-saving stuff, if you like, which kind of complicates the issue, isn't it?
It's a very difficult situation, because it's actually easier for someone to consume a vegan diet, consume a plant-based diet, than it is for them to like avoid the products of vivisection, because almost all drugs have been tested on animals. Loads of household products have, and although it's kind of easier to avoid those and buy alternatives, with drugs, somebody has a particular ailment and feels that they kind of need to take a drug for that ailment, then the only one available on the market very often is one that's been tested on animals and is sold by a company that is still doing animal experiments. Now, the animal experiments done to develop that drug, they're already done. They're already gone. Those animals have died, they suffered perhaps some while ago. But by taking that drug, you're still causing money to be put into the hands of that company that's carrying on, still does animal experimentation. So that's kind of the that's the kind of.
But the solution's the same, isn't it? You need more vegans to be able to change the system.
You need more vegans if we're going to get rid of animal experimentation, and we're going to have replace these experiments by non-animal methods, which kind of really already exist. It's just that they're kind of not, because we've got this industry that is so fixated with testing.
Well, they've been around. They've been around for decades now, haven't they? I mean, when I came into the movement, you had all. I mean, the Dowding Fund and Hadwin Trust and all this kind of stuff. There's modern day versions of that, and some of them are still going. So it's not as though that stuff's not around.
That's right, but I think it's really important to think
like you say, right?
The reason again. It's really important to say though that the reason why animal experimentation is wrong is not because it's unscientific, right? The reason why, the main reason, the overriding reason why it's wrong, and the fundamental reason why it's wrong, isn't because it's unscientific, isn't because we've already got other non-as methods that we could use. The fundamental reason why animal experimentation is wrong is because it's morally wrong. Whether or not it would be of benefit to humans, it's still wrong, in the same way as Nazi experiments on other races were wrong, no matter what benefit they may have had for the Aryan race. And that's the reason we have to. And sometimes I worry that people are constantly putting forward this kind of scientific argument and ignoring the moral argument. And the moral argument is the most important one. And the moral argument is the overriding one. And it's actually easy to argue. If I'm at a stall and some guy comes up claiming to be a scientist and says, "Oh, I can reel off loads of instances where animals, experiments on animals benefited humans," I'm not a scientist. How am I going to argue with him on scientific grounds? But I can on moral grounds, and he can't argue with me on moral grounds. The moral position is actually absolutely watertight on that, and that's the difficulty.
Yeah, there is that quirk that when Hans Royce was really strong in the movement, and that goes back to the early 80s as well. Hidden Crimes, the film, the chapter 7 or 8, it's basically saying don't argue for animal rights because human beings are selfish.
Completely the wrong way round. The wrong way round. And there was a lot of problems in the movement. There was violence between Hans Royce supporters and people that wanted to put forward the moral argument. And they were so opposed to it.
They did go under the name suppress. So what do you expect?
It was kind of like it's a madness and a lunacy. People think the infighting within the movement is like a new thing. People kind of hating one another on social media and stuff and all that's new thing. No, it's not. It might be more now because there's more means of expressing it with all the social media. But no,
you want to tackle this one, Ronnie, because we're coming up to our time. So do you want to tackle that one?
Why do they need to? Well, I don't think it's that they need to. A lot of things they don't need to do. That they do it out of habit. They do it.
It might if they change the recipe, then they will. Then after them,
that's it. Because they'll do it because they consider those animals as of no value. So like, well, just let's use animals and that's it. Doesn't matter.
And then you've got the batch problem. I mean, we were talking about the batch problem before we came on.
This is another issue, and this is another difficulty that with a lot of medical products isn't just the experimentation in the development of the drug. We had this thing with the COVID vaccines that these vaccines were developed. Part of the development stage of the vaccines was experiments on animals. I think with all of them, right? Animals were used. It isn't just that batches of the vaccine were tested for contamination, I think bacterial contamination, by using horseshoe crabs. And I think 70%, they say, oh, we return them to the sea afterwards. But in fact, I think about 70% of them perish, don't survive the process because what they do is...
I heard about 30%, but the problem is of that 70% that didn't die, they got recaught.
Well, yes, and this is constant cycle. Yes, whatever the percentage, I mean, they shouldn't be using them anyway. What's it got? Fuck's got to do with horseshoe crabs? Leave them alone. You know what I mean? This is a human problem. But they use their blood, and they're sort of kept trapped in a device, and their blood's drained off, and they use the blood to test the batches of vaccine.
It's like a filtering system, isn't it?
Yeah. But the problem is that isn't just used for vaccines. It's used for all injectable drugs. If someone's on a drip, that batch of whatever's used in a drip they'll use horseshoe crabs for it. So it's wider than just the drug being developed, you know, through using animals or animals part of that process. It's also testing of.
Yeah, but I mean,
so it's really impossible to avoid. If you're in hospital and you have to be put on a drip, you know, that batch of that drip, horseshoe crabs. So it's one of these things where it's pretty much unavoidable, and we can only do our best. And like the vegan ethic is about doing our best, isn't it? It's about as far as practical, you know, vegan society's definition, as far as practical and possible to avoid involvement in
practical. Yeah, but I mean, the point there is that that's why vegans tend to go for the generic stuff, the stuff that is, you know, many years old and has never been upgraded and reformulated, because that means if it's new, improved, I mean, whether you're talking about shampoo or, well, I mean, obviously we wouldn't go anywhere near the shampoo ends, but if anything, household products, everything, new, improved means retested, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, I don't go anywhere near shampoo, Roger, as you could probably see.
Yeah, that's a non-point on your behalf.
It looks like you've gone near bleach, to be quite honest, but you know.
It's because it's so sunny here, Ronnie. That's what it is.
Yeah, in sunny Dublin. Yeah, like the Costa del Dublin.
Yeah. But cost of packet.
Yeah, this is the thing. You know, it's all part of doing our best. You know, we try and do our best in the circumstance, and sometimes it's complicated, and you do your best. And that it's like, you know, veganism is a philosophy. Fundamentally, you say, I believe in animal liberation. I'm opposed to speciesism. I'm opposed to human supremacism. That's my philosophy. And now I'm going to do my best to live according to that philosophy. You know, we're living in an imperfect world, and it's impossible to be perfect. I'm going to kind of do my best. And those two things together, that's what equals veganism. You know, it's the acceptance, belief in the philosophy, acceptance of philosophy, and the kind of vowing to yourself that you're going to try your best to live according to it in your own life. You know, we can, you know, we live in an imperfect world, and even animal products. I mean, animal products, we're always finding out that they put animal products in something, tires of cars and different things.
Mop and glow for you.
Yeah. As long as
a vegan version of Pledge or something like that.
Yeah. Just a Brillo pad, really, or something like. Mind you, I think Brillo pads are dodgy. What's in them? I think that's on animals as well. So you've got to be careful. But yeah. So kind of what I'd say is that. I mean,
make your final statement, Ronnie.
The final statement is that if we're going to avoid a Groundhog Day situation over and over again in terms of the struggle against animal experimentation, then there has to be a huge amount of vegan education in tandem, I would say, with the campaigns against vivisection.
Not before.
Well, I realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think you're going to get people.
Yeah, well, I'm okay with in tandem. I was just asking.
Yeah, in tandem. No, yeah. You know, and you know, what I'd say to people that are involved in those campaigns is, I wouldn't say stop doing those campaigns. I'd say, yeah, I'm in solidarity with what you're doing. You know, keep on fighting. But how can you incorporate vegan education into what you're doing? That's the first thing. And secondly, now, everyone that calls themselves a vegan regards themselves like as a, you know, as a vegan, right? Like a proper vegan, that, you know, they're an animal liberationists in their view. All those people are going to be opposed to animal experiments. Otherwise, you're not an animal liberationist. But so few of those people regarding themselves as vegans are doing anything to combat animal experimentation, apart from perhaps, you know, trying to buy cruelty-free, you know, shampoo and makeup and that or whatever, and maybe not giving money to the British Heart Foundation. You know, it's avoidance. You know, they're involved in avoidance things. But like, we all need to do more than that. We need, you know, if we really want to combat animal experimentation, and we really want to act in solidarity with you know, those courageous people who rescued those beagles, and, you know, people like Mel that's in prison for combating animal experimentation, then we all have to be active in spreading the vegan message in whatever way we can. Even that's
but Ronnie, the roadblock to what you're saying in regard to what you've just said there is the fact that we're running into the kind of cranky vegan problem here, which is that the chances are there's going to be a lot of non-vegans at Camp Beagle, right? And so therefore they wouldn't want necessarily to have a big vegan emphasis.
Well, yeah, but exactly what they should be having. Exactly what they should be having. I mean, I've been to Camp Beagle and there were vegan booklets there, you know, and I've left vegan booklets there that they had on display for people to take. Now, hopefully they're still continuing that, because that's like really important. Those people need to be, you've already got people that are primed for education. You have people that are opposed to like one form of animal oppression, the oppression of other animals, you know, get them to see the connection.
But you're missing the point in a little bit, in the sense that the argument is don't focus on veganism, because that's going to be off-putting to the
but then that leads to the problem that I've just, you know, I've just brought up about, you know, Groundhog Day. That leads to the problem that then you know, by not educating those people to go vegan, you're actually not doing anything, you know, to destroy those rocks that campaign's eventually going to be dashed against. You're not doing anything to change the nature of the state unless you educate people to go vegan. So they're undermined by not, you know, by saying that, by saying, oh, we don't want to mention veganism. They're actually fundamentally undermining what, you know, what they want to achieve.
It's a bit isolationist, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well,
and so that's the argument. You know, once again,
you know that I agree with you, Ronnie.
I think you've of course got to agree with me. That's part of the contract, is it, of me appearing on this program.
Oh, that is,
along with my £10,000.
No, I'll jot that back. Always agree with Ronnie. Okay, so
yeah. So of course, once again, my message to everyone is like, if you want to see an end to vivisection, you got to do vegan education, and you know, we need it everywhere, and we need all vegans to be involved in it whatever way that we can, and we need more vegans to instigate it in their own local areas. And I know I've never said that before, but there's always a first time, isn't there, for everything?
There is, yeah. You can't accuse you of not being original, Ronnie.
And then we might eventually have what it says on my t-shirt here, which in English is empty cages. Empty cages and animal liberation.
Right, people. Thank you so much for all the people in the chat, and it was a lively discussion today. And thanks, Ronnie, for all those points. And we shall see you in some form or other next week. So TTFN, they used to say on the radio. Remember that, Ronnie?
Yeah, I kind of do. Yeah.
Yeah, ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now, yes.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon.